Okay, I've got two passages to start. And I also want to tell you where we're going, because my guess is that what we're going to do on Sunday will be on your mind tonight. So I want to tell you what's coming Sunday so you can hold off until then. This class is suffering with family. What does it mean to be family? One of the things that we do together is suffer together. We're going to talk about that. Suffering with family. On Sunday, we're going to change the word to suffering because of family, which unfortunately is a reality that I took those notes and I took them out of the schedule because it's not a fun conversation. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, if we're going to do it, then let's do it. And suffering happens often at the hands of those that we love the most. It's just one of those things that I wish wasn't true, but it is. And so if you want to talk about that, hold off until Sunday, because there's a whole class for that, sadly, unfortunately. Here's what this class is governed by. Romans chapter 12 and verse 15. You don't need to turn there. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. The weep with those who weep part. It's really nice. I've got a lot of this from you all too, talking through this quarter so far. I'm really glad that I'm not the only one that this is my favorite subject. I love my family. I love this as a family. It's aside from being right with God and the promise of heaven, this is my favorite part of Christianity, which is a really big deal. And so I'm really loving this class, and I'm loving the interaction outside of this class with you talking about these things. And so I love it. It's awesome. But here's the thing. The unity and the loyalty and the sharing our stuff and all the cooperating together and operating together, everything that we've talked about, those things are nice and they're biblical and they're critical. But here's the thing. When suffering happens, it's game day. And that's when it's time to not drop the ball. When somebody in our family is hurting. And so what I would like for us to do in this class is not just say, hey, this is really neat and awesome to have this great family. I would like for us to come to this class with, it's time to tighten our belt, gird up your loins, is the Bible way of saying it, and get yourself ready, because dropping the ball when one of our people is hurting is not an option. And it's happened before, and it can never happen again. I'm not thinking of something specifically. I'm saying we all make mistakes. This is not one of those times when we can make mistakes. And so I want to talk about that. I'm at Galatians chapter 6 and verses 1 and 2. Again, you can turn there if you like, but you will know this. Brothers is how it starts. That's family. Don't ever skip the 139 times that Paul says the word brothers. It's not a punctuation mark, and it's not something that he says because he can't remember people's names. He's referring to these Christians as his family, brothers. He says, bear one another's burdens. That's what we're called to do as God's people. You have a load that you're trying to carry, and it's heavy. If I can't carry it for you, I'm going to help you carry it. That's what bear your burdens means. And so the next passage that we're going to look at, maybe you'll have something first. The next passage I intend to look at is Hebrews 10. But before we do that, I just want to talk about some stuff. And I'll get you started, and then I want to hear what you have to say. How many times have you been in the hospital or at a funeral or another terrible situation in somebody's life, and you watch the church family do what the church family does, I actually want to see you raise your hand if this is true for you. How many people have said the words, I don't know how people do this without a church family? How many times does that come out of your, look, seriously, look around when you see that. Every time, like you go through something like that and you look around and you're like, how does this happen without the family and the support network that we have because of what God has blessed us with? And the first one, I became a Christian in 1997, and I had a great experience. I was born into a spiritual family that was really good and took care of me and raised me in a good way, I think. But it wasn't until 2001, 97, it was January of 97, so all of 97, 98, 99, 2000, 5 years later. 5 years after I became a Christian was my first experience watching the church family be a church family. And it was when Becky's brother died in 2001. And that's just one of those things. It was a horrible experience, but the thing that I remember about it is not the horrible experience. The thing that I remember about it was, it had been 5 years, but I was still young at the time, just watching Christianity happen in that whole thing. And it burned itself into my mind just to watch the whole thing. And this is kind of neat. This is the one at the top of that list. Becky's dad is Dick, and his best friend in the whole world is a man named Mike Nolte. Anybody know Mike? Mike was on a business trip whenever we got the news about Luke. And Mike immediately bought a plane ticket, went to the airport, canceled his business trip, and flew home right then. And it's like, how do you forget something like that? Here's something neat about that. I tell that story when I do these lessons in gospel meetings. I've told these stories all over wherever I go. And next month in June, I'm going to Campbell Road in Dallas, where Mike goes to church. And I'm going to tell this story for the first time with him sitting there listening to it. And it's like, that's the sort of thing that matters, to see that stuff. Do you have something that you want to talk about? I mean, some monumental, somebody showed up when it was your turn to suffer, and it's life-changing when it happens.
I just remember back in '06, my mother passed away, and I was in Indiana. I had my physical family there, but I was devastated. We didn't expect her to die, and I was just devastated. And so Susan and Joe and Beth drove all the way from St. Louis to South Bend, Indiana, to be there for me at my mom's funeral.
Yeah.
And then Susan, we had an extra car there, and Susan drove one of our cars back home by herself.
Yeah. It's a neater story sitting right next to her. Yeah. Anybody have one? Cindy?
When we lived here and we had just moved to Indiana, I found out that I had breast cancer, and it was scary, and I didn't know anyone there really. And the next thing I know, I had 5 ladies from St. Louis area, Kirkwood Church, come and be with me,
Yeah.
because they knew I didn't know very many.
Yeah.
So
So,
they did the same. They were talking about.
yeah. The first lesson is everybody stop going to Indiana. But here's the thing. We keep it going. I got more space built in. But here's the thing that I wanted to do about this. This isn't story time. These things that you're listening to are examples of what you need to get yourself ready to do. We don't hear other people say, oh, hey, someone else did this. Right now, what we're all doing is we're getting ourselves ready to say, that's my family, and when they need me, I'm there. That's what's coming. Brooke?
I mean, I already cried, but a little too close to home. But all of you probably know Ryan came to Cheryl's funeral, and I was in at church, or whenever he was talking, Chad was talking to Ryan, and Chad came to me, and he's like, "You won't believe it." And I'm like, "What?" He said, "Ryan just told me kind of nonchalantly he's coming to Paris, Texas." And I went, "No way! I can't believe this." And what's even more impactful, not only was Ryan there, and we felt all the love from all of you, but the influence that Ryan has had on my family, because all of my dad, my stepmom, my mom, my stepdad, all of my immediate family all came and they saw Ryan, and they still can't stop talking about it. My mom still cries
Yeah.
every time she talks about Ryan being there.
Well, that's nice.
I'll talk bad about
No.
it.
Do I match my shirt? I feel it. In the police academy, they called me Mr. Tomato Head because they would try and put you in super uncomfortable situations, and you're supposed to practice keeping your cool, and I can feel the thing happening where my head just, thank you. Did I see another one, Dave?
Mine's more nuclear, I guess, whereas my immediate family is just my dad and me. And I see the importance of suffering with family as a father, as a head, and a leader of the household, speaking with children who are ignorant but needing to be spoken to. And it's burned in my memory of his long suffering for me in my belligerence of wanting to hold on to my adolescence and stupidity and emotional illogic. And I just spewed that out at my dad one evening when he'd come up to pray with me, as the tradition was. And he more or less walked out. And I just viewed it as him throwing his hands up, I don't know what to do with this child. And then he came back shortly after, and he said, no, that's not what's going to happen here. And he went from there to express to me what I reflect on now is the tremendous importance of the effect of a father who knows the way a child ought to go and is willing to step in the way when they're going the wrong direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Do this. Go to Hebrews 10, please. I am in love with this verse in Hebrews 10. I know that I say this a lot and it waters it down, but I'll say it on this one and mean it sincerely. If ever there is a verse worth highlighting in your Bible, I think this is one of those. So, in the early church, I'm talking about after the New Testament period of time, there are two categories of persecuted people. One is called a martyr. A martyr is one who has been killed for their faith. Like, they stood for their faith, and because of their faith, they were put to death because of it. That's a martyr. But not everybody was killed. Some people just suffered a lot. They were arrested and beaten and persecuted in all different manners of ways. Those people are not called martyrs, they're called confessors. And a confessor was somebody who is not killed for their faith, but suffering for their faith. And so here is just a real quick quote about life as a confessor. To survive in a Roman prison, a person had to depend on his family to bring him the necessities of food and clothing, so he could stay alive long enough to face his accusers. For the Christians, the church was their family. So you don't go to jail and get served 3 squares a day and here's your comfortable bed. You go to a hole in the ground, and if you want to eat, it's because people who love you bring you food. That's the circumstances in the first century world. And so Hebrews chapter 10, starting in verse 32, you see life as a persecuted Christian. And this is just so amazing to me. I love this. I love it because it's not that it's a beautiful verse. It's because it's so true. If I went downstairs and I read this verse to the high schoolers, they'd be like, meh. But when you do this a couple times, this verse changes the way that it reads. Verse 32. But recall the former days when, after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings. Here it is. Sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction. Okay? Got that? Sometimes it's your turn to walk through the fire. But look at the next one. And sometimes being partners with those so treated. So sometimes it's your turn to walk through the fire. And when it's not your turn to walk through the fire, it's your turn to walk with those who are walking through the fire. Listen to it again. It's awesome. Sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so treated. For, here's an example of that. You had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession, an abiding one. So, some people go to prison. Some people have compassion on our brethren who are in prison, which is, you know what the Bible word is for that? The New Testament Bible word for that is visiting. It doesn't mean dropping by to pay a visit. It means taking care of. I've got another one since you're here. Chapter 13 and verse 3. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 3. This is a command for God's people. Remember those who are in prison, as though in prison with them. That's the thing. And remember those in prison doesn't mean this. All right, it just passed through my mind. Check. That's not what he's talking about. It's remember them in the setting of go take care of them. Remember those who are in prison to the extent as if you yourself were in prison with them. Nobody among God's people suffers alone. No. Nobody among God's people should suffer alone. That's the way that we'll say that. Other comments about that and like the illustration from this text, or any other examples or things that are thinking?
I think just an interesting point about the emphasis of it being in public. I mean, in Roman times, I guess I can understand that. You know, their property being taken, them being made a spectacle of. But I think like in our modern application, that could be someone losing their job for a particular Christian belief. And I think it just draws a different level when it talks about, you know, if one of us were thrown through the ringer publicly. Thankfully, I don't have any examples of that in my real life, but we should be ready for the private suffering and the public.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm mentally prepared for the public.
Yeah. Yeah. But the picture, how would that picture look different if just an imaginary scenario right now, you do the public suffering and the shame that's associated with it, and Kevin gets up out of his seat and he comes over and doesn't say a word, but he stands right next to you. You're not going to, remember the thing? Bear one another's burdens. You're not going to carry this load by yourself. I mean, it's a picture of, do you see what I'm saying? Gird up your loins, what we're doing in this class. And this is not one of those things I'm not ready to talk about this yet, but I'm sure that it's already on your head, and so it's on the next point. So I won't ask you to raise your hand for this one. I asked you to raise your hand for how many times have you said, I don't know how people do this without a Christian family? Please don't raise your hand now. How many times have you heard the words, my mom died and nobody came or called? Or some variation of that. Nobody even called. My first reaction in those situations is to just immediately start with what are probably true excuses for that situation. But every single time it happens, it is a horrible weight of shame. Not only for my own dropping the ball, but for, when the family drops the ball. And I just think, I got two things for you tonight. Before I say the two things I have, anything you want to say right now? I'd rather give you space to say yours. Yep.
When you were just standing there and not saying anything, it's so impactful. And it makes me think every time, that silentness, that just sitting in suffering with someone, every time my family goes through something, the person who's there constantly is Sam. And he doesn't have these poetic words to make you feel good. He's just present and he's there. And through every single loss, every single challenge, Sam is the first one in the door and probably the last one to leave. And he just is there. And it's so encouraging to know like you have someone to lean on. And that's just constant, like a constant in my life. He has been there through it all.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have these big words to say. And sometimes I think we get caught up in saying like, I don't know what to say, or I don't know really what to do. And sometimes, most of the times, people don't need you to say anything. They just need you to be there. So that just made me think of that when you were standing there.
Go to Job chapter 2, please. Everybody, let's turn to Job chapter 2. This actually is the plan. You did perfectly, Emma. Job chapter 2. If you're taking notes and you need your notes to be organized in order to go to sleep tonight, like I do, there's two things that we're going to talk about. Number one, this is how you write this in your notes. Number one, we have to show up. And this is the part where I will emphasize over and over and over again, this is game day, no exceptions, no drop balls. From this day forward, when suffering happens in God's family, we have to show up. And before we read Job chapter 2, I'll tell you the one that is just forever burned into my mind. I think it was 2019. Is it 18 or 19? Some of you all did this with me. Do you remember down the road here, I got that chaplain call because it was a girl. It was right before the school year started. The school year was going to start that week. And this girl was going to start her senior year of high school. And her boyfriend broke up with her that morning. So she went home and went upstairs and got her dad's gun and got into the bathtub and shot herself in the head. And I don't get called on a lot of calls, but that's the kind of thing that they will call a chaplain for. And so I got there, and my job as chaplain is to support the officers. But I say, what can I do for you guys? And every one of them's like, deal with the family. That's how you support the officer. I go over to the family, and the first words out of my mouth, do you have a church family that I can be in touch with? Because if it's me in a situation like that, call one person and it's taken care of. Everybody else will go from there, right? So that's my mind. Do you have a church family that we need to alert? Yes. We go to the family church up in Chesterfield Valley. So I'm like, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. I get in the thing, family church, and I call the family church. Hello, you have reached the family church and all this stuff. And it's like, if you need to talk to somebody, and it goes through all of these lists, and finally it's like, press 34 it's after business hours. And so if you actually need to talk to a person, and I did that. And so I go to an answering service and I say, okay, these people go to church there, and they look up their thing and they're like, yes, I see those people. And I say, this is what happened. And she goes, okay, yeah, I'm really sorry about that. Do you need somebody to come out there tonight? And at that moment, I was like, have you lost your mind? I didn't say that. But I said, yeah, that would be great. And so she said, okay, I will contact somebody and they'll get in touch with you. And so one of the guys called me back and he said, okay, explain the thing. And I told him what was happening and all this. And, he's one of their pastors. And I talk about, this is what happened. This is the family. This is what they're doing. Oh, yeah, I know them. And he goes, okay, do you think I need to come out there tonight? And I'm just like, I will. That's at the very top of my list of things I'll never forget. Something like that can never happen, ever. So Job chapter 2 is one of those things that this is for me. And I would assume this is a man conversation. Ladies, you can probably check out for the next couple minutes because you all seem to know this stuff. But even having some practice, I never know what to say. And even if I did know what to say, I'm the king of awkward. And you all have done that, like Brooke just now. You start crying and I'm like, what do? I don't know what to do. And so Becky has this thing in our house. It's 22 years into this thing, and I still haven't figured it out. And she'll have some sort of a situation, and I'm just like, it's not my thing. That's all I know what to say. Like, it's not my thing. But here's the thing about that. Guys especially, if this is you. In verse 11. Chapter 2 and verse 11. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that had come upon him, they came each from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite. They made an appointment together to come and show him sympathy and comfort him. And when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads toward heaven, and they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. And this is the lesson for you to take away from Job. While they were sitting with him, not saying anything, they were still his friends. It was only after they opened their mouth that they turned into his enemies. And this is it's not a joke. I know you all laugh, but it's not a joke. This is my go-to because my reaction is always, I don't know what to say, but you just heard from Emma's mouth. You don't have to say anything. Just show up. That's the point. We have to show up when it's our turn. Anybody want to say anything about that? Yeah.
And showing up can look different in different situations and at different times. In 14, I had a baby girl pass away. From same behavior. And you guys showed up. 9 weeks later, my brother died from a car accident. And you showed up all over again.
Yeah.
There's just nothing that can compare. And people are watching all around. All of my daycare families, all our neighbors, everybody just watched all of the blessings being poured out on our family for weeks and months to come. Someone paid for my entire salary because they knew I was out of work, obviously, taking some time away. It's stuff that you just think like, who thinks of this stuff? Your church family does, all in little tiny ways too. Breakfast all on the front porch, all the dinners. And it's not that food is the only way to serve, it's just everybody was thinking about something, anything to say, we are with you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I wrote my own thing down here. September 2022, Mom sends a text message about there's something in Dad's throat. And this is what her text said to me and Stacy. That's my sister. I just wanted to let you guys know, this is the end. I just wanted to let you guys know, but I'm not ready to talk about it or see anyone. And so my sister responds and says, what should I do? Mom said, I'm not ready to see anyone right now. And Stacy says, what do I do? And I was like, go right now. Take the day and go. Always go. That's always the answer. And I know that you would say, well, but some of us like our space. Always go. And you don't have to stay, but always go. Just put it in your head right now. What do I do right now? It's in my brain. Always go. That's what's in your head. Okay, number 1, we need to show up. Anything on that one? Number 2, look at 1 Kings 19. I got to move fast because I want to say the last thing. I don't want to run out of time here. Elijah's having a bad day, super bad day. 1 Kings 19 and verse 14. I won't set the whole thing up, but this is the summary. Elijah says to God, I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So he's having a bad day. And if you have a Bible like me, that happened right there. And you can see the heading like 4 lines down the road. Elijah says to God, God, ha! And you see the heading, God says, I'll send you a friend. Here's Elisha. This is where we meet him. And the message, I think, that I'll say, and I won't make a big production out of this because I don't have time, but I kind of want to. Nobody in this room is a mind reader, whether you want us to be or not. And so if you're suffering, you don't have to suffer alone. But I need to know you're suffering. Six times out of 10, I know when Becky's suffering, and she doesn't have to tell me. But I don't know when you're suffering unless you tell me. And so you don't have to suffer alone. That's number 2. Here's the way that I want to end this, and I want you to think about it like this, please. The last moments of Jesus' life can be summarized with a couple of different words like suffering and, torture and all kinds of stuff like that, but loneliness would be on the list. There's Matthew 26:36, praying, and we sing the song, Praying in the Garden Alone. And he asked his friends to pray with him and to stay up with him, and he went back and they were asleep. He's like, can't you just stay awake? I need you right now. And he was alone. And so then in Mark chapter 14 and verse 50, this is what it says when he was arrested. And they all left him and fled. So make sure that you feel the full force of that pain to watch your friends run away. Ryan, that's standing next to you kind of thing. They ran in the other direction. In Matthew 27:46, Jesus is hanging on the cross and cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Loneliness is the word of the hour. He feels alone and he's suffering alone. And this is the piece that I would like for you to remember from this class, please. I want you to hear this part, please. Jesus suffered and died alone so that we don't have to. He did it to give us this relationship with God and be a part of a family so that we don't have to do what he did. And the two parts of that is, number one, you don't have to suffer alone. And number two, when one of our people suffers, it's time to show up. Good? Any last words on that? Yep.
Prayer is a really good thing. That's one thing that stuck with us all these years after Maddie was the prayer service that was held here. As soon as she was diagnosed, Kevin was here with the kids and I was in the hospital with her. It's amazing, that feeling. And we had people all over the world praying for those 2.5 years. It's powerful.
Yeah. And the thing, though, we just talked about that. Jesus in the garden. He didn't ask them to save him. He asked them to pray with him. That's what he asked from his people. And they were not able to do it for him. So I think we have some work. You have a very clear action plan for tonight. Always show up. That's our mission. All right, so I wish that we could stop that conversation and just move on to the next one, but suffering with family is something that we do. Next time we're going to have to talk about suffering because of family because, well,